Welcome to today's show about what's new in Jenkins LTS 2.303.2. The numbers keep getting higher. My name is Darren Pope. I'm a developer advocate for CloudBees, and today, along with me, I have Mark Waite. Mark, how are you doing today?
Great, Darren. Thanks for asking.
Guess what? We had another LTS release. Of course,
We did.
we sort of knew that because you and I are here, and that's about the only reason we ever get together now. So, it came out at the time we're doing this live. It came out yesterday.
Yesterday, that's correct.
Yesterday, correct.
Yep.
So it's as of, and of course you can look down below and do the subscribe things and all those things. But today's October 7th as we're recording this, and actually we're live streaming it. So by the way, if you're just watching this on replay, always check and subscribe to this channel because usually the day after a Jenkins LTS release, we come on and talk about what's new in that release and many other things in the Jenkins community. So that's what today is. So for people that don't understand the Jenkins LTS process, now again, for people that have been here with us in the past, just hang out with us because Mark's going to explain this because no one does it better than Mark. So Mark, why don't you go ahead and explain what the process is for LTS and what it's about?
Sure. So Jenkins releases a new version every week that is off the main branch, but about every 3 months, a long-term support release is selected as the baseline. And that then long-term support release receives initial backports that bring it up to what we had learned from weeklies that followed it, and it then is used as a stable base for the next 3 months. So that stable base for those 3 months lets us start with 2.303.1 is our current example. 1 month later, we'll do 2.303.2, and a month after that, 2.303.3. Each of those increments is a set of relatively smaller changes made to that stable release that then developers and Jenkins administrators can use as their base that they do work for that 3 month period on.
And that's pretty much it. It's all very simple, right? It all sounds very simple.
It actually is. It's very elegant. I'm really proud of the release team. We had a key player in the release team who was unavailable yesterday, and we did the release anyway. So it was great. We love that.
So that team player no longer has to be around.
No, quite the opposite. We learned by painful experience we desperately want that team player to be around, but sometimes you're not available, and so It was really great that it worked so well.
Okay, cool. Well, let's get into what's new. And it's actually a fairly small release, and that's not surprising because this is the .2. And again, we would expect the .3 to also be pretty small.
Right. Well, and this .2 is small in terms of number of changes. That's a good sign. Usually that means the .1 was pretty stable. In this case, the .2 was used to do a security release, and the security release is the real story here. So Jenkins is very carefully monitored by its security officer and a dedicated security team. That security team monitors incoming bug reports. Please use our responsible reporting procedures if you need to report a security issue with Jenkins. But we use those bug reports and prioritize them and then fix them. And this particular release fixed 2 what I'd call interesting bugs that were classified medium. So they're not high and they're not critical, but it's worth talking about these 2. The first here is improper handling of equivalent directory names on Windows. And it's kind of a novel one because it reminds us that Jenkins lives in a world that is multiple platform. And multiple platform can mean different semantics on different file systems. In this particular case, a literal hard stop, a dot, at the end of a file name is treated the same as no character at the end of the file name on the Windows file system. And the danger was that could sometimes cause confusion or allow things to be overwritten when Jenkins thought file name with a dot is different than file name without a dot, whereas on Windows, that is not a difference. On Linux and on the BSDs like Mac OS, FreeBSD, those 2 file names, ABC and ABC dot, are different. In this case, On Windows, those two file names are not different, but a string comparison of them says they're different. And so for me, it's a great story that, oh, wow, yeah, we've got to think multi-platform, and the Windows file system has some unique semantics that Jenkins has to handle.
This is where you insert Windows jokes, right? This is okay.
This is where, as a Windows user, I insert how much I love Windows, that it's got a great user experience. But yes, you're right. There are those people who might insert jokes here about file systems that hold locks for too long, that file systems that don't do the things they want. Yes, it's very much a different file system than Linux is. That's for sure.
That's a very esoteric thing.
It is. This for me is one of those hints of why I love what the Jenkins security team does, because I would never have thought of that technique. And I'm regularly impressed by people in the security space, the things that they consider, oh, what if I did this? It's like, why would you ever do that? But it's a great technique.
Absolutely. Now, how about the second one?
Okay, so the second one is a dependency update that we needed. So an HTTP client library. So rather than writing our own HTTP communication protocols, we rely on the HTTP implementation provided by some libraries. And in this particular case, we had a library version that was included as a transitive dependency, so not directly dependent, but as a transitive dependency, and it would not verify SSL certificates correctly. So what we did was we backported to an old version of this library, incremented it, and included that library into the Jenkins core.
Cool.
That one's sort of an interesting story on how do you maintain dependencies and why it's so important to care about dependencies. Good.
And it's not just dependencies, but it's the dependencies of the dependencies.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that word transitive in that dependency thing is so important, to say, hey, the dependency of the dependencies of the dependencies, or whatever level it is, still matter, because they're being used and they'll be executing, and this thing needed this fix.
Yep. And we've got two more here. Path traversal.
Right. So the path traversal one is an interesting, again, novelty with Windows, that there are certain ways that you can make a file be, or could have made a file be interpreted as though it were an absolute path, and yet not be detected by the code that it was using an absolute path. And absolute pathing can give you access to things that are outside of the Jenkins home tree. And so rather than allow that traversal outside the tree, this now has safeguards that against serving files that might have been considered as absolute paths. And that's the Windows system has several interesting ways to refer to files because of its techniques for doing file sharing, right? It's got some concepts of this form of file sharing or that form of file sharing.
Okay. And then finally, something near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, actually, this one's kind of a shame on me, but it's sometimes it's fun and useful to talk about shame. So here's the shame on me case. Yes, I am one of the maintainers of the Jenkins Git plugin, and yes, there was a security vulnerability. Just so we're clear, that means that this vulnerability affects over 280,000 installations of Jenkins controllers. So people should upgrade their Git plugin. Whereas the other issues that are in this report were listed medium, this one was listed as high. Not critical still, but high. And what it is if someone passed a specially crafted string into the notify commit API entry point. So this is an API entry point that's available through the external, through the web browser, etc. Mm-hmm. If you passed in a specially crafted argument to that thing, you could execute JavaScript in the user's browser the next time they looked at the cause of the build of that was launched by that call. So the challenge here is you had to look at the build cause, and that's where the cross-site scripting vulnerability had been injected. And it's a stored cross-site scripting because it stays there long term. And the defense here has been, sorry, anything that's not clean, in this case, clean hexadecimal, won't be rendered in that field any longer. It's not accepted by the API any longer and won't be rendered any longer by Jenkins.
Okay. Before we continue on, we have a question here. I think now's probably a good time to bring it up. Rashed was asking, is JDK 11 mandatory?
Good question. Yeah. So JDK 11 is not mandatory. Jenkins continues to support Java 8. Jenkins continues to, many of us compile with Java 11 in a way that constructs Java 8 bytecode. And that way we can support both Java 8 and Java 11. The Jenkins Docker images, beginning with 2.303.1, default to delivering Java 11. However, even in that case, if you're a Docker user and you say, I must have Java 8, all you do is choose the tag name, put the -JDK8 suffix. So Jenkins/Jenkins:2.303.1 -JDK8 will deliver you a Java 8 version running with a very new JDK. We keep that JDK up to date. Right now it's 8U302, and the next JDK that's released, we will update to that. So we like JDK 8, we make sure we run with JDK 8, but we also want more and more people to make the switch to Java 11. It's healthier for platform support, it's healthier for users, it'll have a nice long life even after JDK 8 eventually stops.
Okay. So coming back to, whoops, I hit the wrong one. Coming back to the release notes. Now we went through the security fixes. Are there any of these that you want to specifically call out?
Well, so I mentioned the security hardening one, and that very top one is in fact the next piece of that Git plugin problem. The Git plugin problem was it was allowing people to inject malicious content into a field that's stored by Jenkins. This says, now that there's the risk that somebody might have injected that content, we will never render that content. So instead of allowing it to act like HTML, we're absolutely just going to render it as characters.
Good. I do want to call out one more thing here. We usually talk about this too. Right now it's very sunny in Philadelphia, right?
It is. That's good.
And
We like
no
that.
rain anywhere else. This is good. So
Well, and just for those who may not understand what that is, the three icons across the top are the Jenkins rating system, where what we do is we encourage users, those who are installing Jenkins, to click one of those three based on their experience with this release. If you click the sunshine, the far left, it will just increment by 1 and say, oh, we did it. If you click the middle one, it would ask you for what's the bug ID, and don't enter one. What's the bug ID of the thing that caused you the problem? This one is, hey, there was a problem, but I did not roll back. The far right one is, there was a problem, and I had to roll back to a previous version.
Right.
So we love it that users give us this feedback because it helps us identify which bugs are hot and might justify a backport to the next LTS, which bugs get in our way. Yeah, so if you scroll down to 2.303.1, I think you'll see one or two that were quite interesting in that list where, okay, there's some people who submit junk, bless them. Bug 6 is not relevant. Bug 123 is not relevant. It's okay. Rather than worry about how we should sanitize that stuff, we just accept anything they give us. Then we look at it and decide if it's relevant.
Yep. Okay. We've got another question in the chat. I want to hold on to that just for a minute longer. Let's go ahead and double check a few more of these, or go through a couple more of these items here.
Great. Yeah. So there were a couple of regressions that we got fixed. This first one is that in 2.303.1, if your configuration as code was defining view-related permissions, Jenkins would refuse to start. And that's a big deal. Not starting because you define some particularly interesting set of permissions should not block your startup. So that bug's been fixed. It was a 303.1 regression that we missed during the qualification phase of 303.1. So we've got some more work to do on our testing as we decide which things we test and when.
Okay. This default key store type is interesting to me.
And it's interesting to me as well because what happened here, again, this is, I'd call it a regression. What happened was we previously had allowed intentionally that users could configure the Java virtual machine to answer TLS queries, so to run SSL secured. Now, I prefer my HTTP reverse proxy like Nginx to do that for me. But you are allowed to do this where you have Jenkins do it inside its own JVM. And what happened was in 303.1, that capability stopped working. So, and it stopped working in this case because the version of the library we were using to provide HTTP, in this case Jetty, needed an upgrade. And so we upgraded from 9.4.42 to 9.4.43.
Right. Okay. I had to laugh when I saw this one.
Okay. Yeah, so
Just
this one is, okay, we got to get the parameter types right. And yeah, let's get this one fixed, an awkward regression. And then the last two are just upgrades of dependencies as part of our general health and well-being of the system, particularly the Xstream one that you're highlighting, is important that we upgrade it. We spent years running an outdated version of Xstream, and the hassles that went with not keeping that thing up to date were enormous. So we've learned our lesson there, and we like to update Xstream almost any time it releases. It's that close to us. It's too important to Jenkins for us to let it fall behind ever again.
right. I'm going to go and bring this question up here. And will different Java versions on Jenkins controller, Java 11, and agents Java 8 bring issues?
So the Jenkins documentation page on www.jenkins.io advises that it is best to run your agents and your controller with the same Java virtual machine. It's best because that allows the transmission of classes that are defined and instantiated on the controller to be shipped to the agent without surprises. Okay, I've said what the documentation says. Now I have to give my personal experience. I spent months running Java 11 on my controller with Java 8 agents and found no problems and no issues. So I know what the documentation says, and I know how smart the people are who wrote that documentation. So I trust them, but I can give you my personal observation that I did not encounter any problems while I was running Java 11 on the controller and Java 8 on the agents. Now, in my case, it's far better that I switched to Java 11 on the agents because some of my agents don't have a viable Java 8 even available for them, but Java 11 is available.
The services person inside of me would be, if it works, great, but it's not recommended.
Right.
And if you can get your agent to have the exact same version of the JDK that you're running on your controller, and then you can also install another version of Java on there. Just don't make it your default or anything else. Just big folder of op tools, and you reference it as you need it.
And that's an important observation that you made there, Darren, that the choice of JDK that I run on the agent does not preclude me using any arbitrary JDK or other build tool on that agent. So running Java 11 on the agent does not stop me from compiling with Java 17 or compiling with Java 14 if I wish, or compiling with Java 8 or Java 7. So running the agent with a JDK is fine. It does not stop you and doesn't in any way get in your way actually from compiling with other JDKs. Just use them as a tool and install that version of tool. So ci.jenkins.io, as one example, has Java 11 agents and Java 11 on the controller, but we regularly compile with Java 8 on the agents, and now we're even regularly compiling with Java 17. So Java 11 on the agent is no problem. We can use whichever tool we want for that.
Right. I'm going to hold, Rashad, I'm going to hold on your question just for a few minutes. We will come back to it. Let's go take a look at the upgrade guide, because before we started live today, Mark and I were talking about this, and I had read it and was like, I don't really get it, and he explained a couple of things about it. So let's talk about why is this important, and now this maps back to the security release, right? This long
does.
write-up is about that. So
That's correct.
give us some more information about that.
Yeah, so you go ahead and share that
I
upgrade
am.
guide.
Yeah, I just realized I wasn't showing it. That's details.
Okay, so back to Mark's shame and the Git plugin, the build cause, the thing that was actually used to exercise the stored cross-site scripting vulnerability, is a field, a page that can be brought up to show what motivated this build. It's a little bit of HTML in prior versions. And the problem with that little bit of HTML is that if someone had injected JavaScript into it, if it's treated as HTML, it will be executed in the user browser with the user context and the user permissions. And that's very unhealthy. So what they've done is, as a safeguard, as a hardening against this kind of problem, this short description field of build causes is now just text. So if you were relying on being able to embed HTML previously, sorry, no HTML allowed.
Okay. And that's really the only major upgrade thing that may bite somebody.
Exactly.
At least from and this would be considered core, correct?
This is core, right?
Okay.
That is a change to core. What that is that's the security hardening change to core that was described in the changelog. The first changelog entry talks about this one and tells us, yes, we've hardened this so that if somebody else makes the same mistake that Mark Waite made in the Git plugin, we won't be vulnerable to that mistake, causing a cross-site scripting vulnerability.
Right. I'm going to go and pull up Rashad's question here, and I haven't looked at this yet. So nodes and processes not compatible with .2 yet.
That's a very good question. Thanks for asking it. So it is compatible. What Rashad is referring to is the fact that when you look at the installation plugin manager, or when you look at the plugin manager page on Jenkins, it will say, hey, 2.40 is available, but there's a nice little dialog right below it that warns, hey, but the data format may not be compatible with your previous version. Think carefully as you upgrade this. Well, what that's saying, and if you in that user interface, if you click on the link to that plugin, what it will do is take you to the plugins.jenkins.io page for it. And when you read the releases tab there, it will tell you pipeline nodes and processes 2.40 has adapted itself to the new name for the node that is on the Jenkins controller. So beginning with 2.307 and later, the Jenkins controller's built-in node has a new name. Instead of being called master, it's called built-in. And this plugin adapts to that. It recognizes that, hey, on older versions, the name is master. On newer versions, the name is built-in. And in order to warn users about that change, this note that says, hey, this plugin may be incompatible, is the technique that was used. So it's actually quite harmless, and it won't block anyone and won't have any different behavior actually on 2.303.2 or 2.303.3. What will happen, though, is that on the next LTS 3 months from now or 2 months from now, the name of that built-in node will optionally change. And again, it's optional. And Darren and I promised to talk about this when we get to the upgrade guide for the next release. The real answer is you are welcome to install that. I have not heard of anyone having any compatibility issues with 2.40, but the plugin maintainers wanted to be very careful and be sure they notify people if they're running weekly. This is something that, and if they've chosen something different as their code for node name, they may need to deal with that. So it's a cool thing that as we get more inclusive naming in the Jenkins project, some of these kinds of changes happen. So Darren, did that help? Forgive the little bit wild explanation.
No, it's a perfect explanation because I had no clue. So that helps a lot.
Well, and Rashad, thank you for asking. That was a great question.
And that is now one item that we know we have to get on the next major
Right.
3XY, whatever that's going to be.
Right. Whatever
Version.
whatever version number the next LTS is, that will be in the upgrade guide, and there will be several different facets of what that change means and how you deal with it.
Yeah. Okay. We've sort of gone through the new stuff, but there's a lot of stuff going on within the community throughout this month and specifically coming up this weekend. So which do you want to talk about first? Do you want to just talk about our friend and yours, Hacktoberfest?
Yeah, let's do Hacktoberfest. I think that's a great choice. So Hacktoberfest is a month-long celebration of open source software, created by DigitalOcean and sponsored by DigitalOcean, Intel, AppSource, and others. We're very grateful to them. We've participated as a Jenkins project for many, many years and had very, very good results from it. So Hacktoberfest encourages new contributors to get involved in open source. And the Jenkins project is uniquely well suited to this because we have opportunities for contributors to help us on all sorts of different things. You may say, oh, but I'm not a programmer, or I'm not a Java programmer. Yeah, that's fine. We have opportunities where you can help in small but meaningful ways with things like migrating plugin documentation to GitHub so that the plugin maintainer has an easier job of updating the documentation. You may say, oh, but that's easy. Yeah, it may be. It's relatively simple. You could do that particular task most times in less than 30 minutes. And you'll learn something about GitHub, you'll learn something about documentation, you'll learn something about that plugin and submitting a pull request. There are ways that you could help with plugin modernization. If you want to do a little bit of Java work and get some experience there, there are some really cool ideas around modernizing Jenkins plugins so that they are easier to maintain, easier to develop. Again, small contribution, great way to help, and doesn't take a lot of your time to participate in Hacktoberfest.
And a couple of those items that Mark were just called out, last weekend, the first part of the Jenkins Contributor Summit happened. And those two items that he just called out, doing migrating plugin documentation and modernizing plugins, are part of that summit. Now, this summit, in fact, I'll go ahead and put, in case you're watching right now, I'm going to put the link to that episode in the chat. And watch the whole thing. It is 2.5 hours long, so get some snacks, prop your feet up, and that'll make it go by a little faster. But notice that this was just part one. Now, I am not a rocket scientist by any stretch of the imagination. But usually if I see a part one, that means there's at least a part two. Is that true?
There's a part two. So part one was last Saturday, the 2nd. Part two is this Saturday, the 9th. Last Saturday's session was during Asia Pacific time zone, so it was 7 a.m. So this is great that you're showing this, because on the right-hand side of this, you see the time. 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Now, 3 a.m. is not convenient for most people in Eastern Time, right? Usually you're asleep at 3 a.m. Mm-hmm. This is our first experiment in doing an Asia Pacific Contributor Summit. All of our previous contributor summits have been focused on making sure that we could reach from California to Europe. And this one, we have shifted our attempt to reach people and put it in Asia. Now that means when I was talking last time, it was between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. my time. So expecting me to be perfectly coherent in those conversations was probably a little higher expectation than is reasonable. But it's there.
Yeah,
we'll do the same thing. Oh, go ahead.
And I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that meetup also in the chat. So if you're interested in showing up for that, even part of it, I think the key part to that, though, is all like this 2.5 hour video that was from last week. I'm assuming, Mark, that same basically 2 hours up front is going to be happening.
No, actually it'll be a different presentation. So we've got different content for this part two.
Right, but is it going to be happening at the front, or is it happening at the back?
Well,
okay.
we'll have we'll record all the sessions, and in part two, we're going to do a project update, and then we're going to do unconference sessions where we're going to work with each other and talk about how we should evolve Jenkins. So those sessions will all be recorded, and we'll then post the recordings so that people who needed to sleep during this time could catch up.
Got it. And those videos will go onto the Jenkins YouTube channel, correct?
That's correct, right.
Okay, got it. So if you're interested in catching up from last week, signing up for this week, Mark, I will tell you, 3 a.m. to 10 a.m., I won't be there. Actually, I could be, because I get up 30 minutes after you start, but it's...
Oh, that's impressive. Yeah. See, this is clearly the dead middle of my night. So,
yeah.
But the experiment's been worth it. We love the results of our last experiment, and you can see here, 60 attendees is a good number. Yep. We're looking forward to more people and trying to reach the community in India, the community in Australia, in China, and in Japan. It's even almost reachable for the people in New Zealand. So it's a little late in their evening, but it's still workable for them to start.
Time zones. Such a hard thing. Okay. So that's coming up this Saturday, but there's something else that's coming up in the next few weeks that's really important to the community. And I think that is not it. I lost it.
Actually, that is it. That's perfect. That's, okay. It's the elections, and it's up at the topmost. So what you're showing us right now, Darren, is community.jenkins.io, a discourse server that has been donated to the Jenkins project, and we're very grateful for this. This is a really great experience for us. That topmost row there, Jenkins Election 2021 proposal, is where Olivier Vernin has announced the Jenkins elections. So every year we elect all of our officers, and we rotate through a portion of the board each year. So this year we'll be electing 2 board members, and 5 officers. And that election process, we want people to vote, we want them to be involved. And so in order to get involved, the first thing that these people need to do is register to vote. And that voter registration is through that site, community.jenkins.io.
Now, Mark will throw me under the bus politely, because Mark can do nothing ever mean, but he will put me under the bus politely.
Right. So
I had not signed up yet.
Exactly. Darren has not registered to vote yet. All right.
Now,
so if you don't register to vote, you don't get to vote.
You don't get to vote. Now, the first thing that you need to do, though, is you have to have an account on community.jenkins.io. True or false?
That is correct. You must sign in to community.jenkins.io. And Darren has done that. He's done that.
Yep. And then, what do we do?
Well, even before that, I wanted to spend a minute on your experience registering with community.jenkins.io.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to log out.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay.
So let me do that, just so it's... I have set up my account, but let me show you how so I clicked on sign up before, and you can do the normal big fill in the box, or you can do with GitHub, which is what I did.
Right. And I highly recommend the with GitHub, because we're all GitHub users, and this thing is very careful about not using anything more from GitHub than it absolutely has to. They're very, very good about it.
It was just email. When it popped up that OAuth screen,
exactly.
it was like one thing, and I'm not used to seeing just one thing. I'm used to seeing a list of things.
That one thing is actually crucial for this voting process, but it's the only thing we need for the voting process. So you log in, use your GitHub credentials. Now, if people don't want to use GitHub credentials, they can create completely independent credentials as well.
Yep.
But so now you're logged in.
I'm logged in.
And now in that Jenkins elections post is a link to the election registration instructions.
Okay, let's figure out. Okay, so we logged in. So I'm trying to help people out. Where could they even find that? Because obviously we did some magic and figured out where I was, but now that I logged out and logged back in, where's that post?
Top right-hand corner of the page is a search thing. Yeah. Click that and look for election.
Election.
And it's there it is, top hit.
Okay, 2021 proposal.
And now as you scroll down this page, keep scrolling down and you'll see okay, here's how we're going to identify voters, identify nominees, keep going.
Okay.
And here, let's see, oops, back up, sorry.
right here.
It's under identified voters. Yeah, the link, we ask every community member who matches the requirements to join this group. So you click that hyperlink, election voter.
Okay. Got it. And I'm
now
still
this
logged
is
in
what-
here, which is good.
Absolutely. And now at the top right-hand corner, you see that join button. So
Mm-hmm.
right now there are 25 members. When you click join, the number of members will go to 26 and you'll be a voter.
Okay, here we go. Cross my fingers. Hey, there I am.
Now, as a way to remind people, the requirements in order to vote in the Jenkins elections is you need to have been a contributor prior to September 1. But contributor uses the Jenkins project's definition of contributor, which means, did you help someone in an online forum? Did you assist colleagues at your work with Jenkins? Did you participate in some way in a Jenkins meetup? It is not just code contributions. This is contributing to help people use Jenkins qualifies you to vote in the Jenkins elections. So register to vote. When the voting begins, what will happen is we will actually extract the email address for each user here, and we will have the Condorcet Internet Voting System or Internet Voting Service send them the ballot. And Condorcet is this really cool ranked choice voting system that is just a bunch of fun and helps us have a good, effective, well-run election without us having to host election software.
Voting is fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, you look at the technology behind this thing and the mathematics of it, and ranked choice voting is really a cool technique.
Interesting.
Now, ranked choice voting is why I didn't get elected to the board last year, actually. So that makes it fun.
Yep. Okay. So, did we get through everything? I think we did. Is that it?
Let's see. Was there was I thought-
Hacktoberfest.
Yeah,
we talked about.
I think we've covered all our topics.
Yeah. And what Rashad said here, I think is pretty good. That'll be great. 2:30 in the morning in Bangladesh, but the weekend.
No. So Rashid may have misunderstood because it'll be about noon his time in Bangladesh.
Yeah, because it's happening. Well, that was last week's. Here is this week's, October 9th,
Right.
3 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern.
Right.
Eastern.
Which
so United
means-
States Eastern.
Right, which means about noon.
Yeah, about noon.
Or 11:30 or 12:30 in Bangladesh or in you choose your Asian time zone. So Thailand, India, etc. All that should be right in the middle of your Saturday.
Yep. And this is why why the project decided to do it at this time frame is to try to include some people that usually aren't included.
Well, we tend to be, at times, I'm at least quite Eurocentric, right? And my Eurocentrism sometimes says, I want to put things in my time zone. And in this case, we've got a lot of contributors who are interested. For instance, most of our Google Summer of Code students in the Jenkins project this year, of the 5 projects, were based from Japan to India. So here we had these students that are on Pacific times, but most of our mentors were on European or US times. So we want to broaden and deepen that experience for everybody. Be sure that we get additional contributors in the Pacific areas, and be sure that our people in European time zones and US and North and South America time zones are also able to contribute.
Very cool. So if that's going to be it, you will see us back in the next 4 to 6 weeks. It should be 4. Things can happen.
Right.
Sometimes it can be a little bit longer. It will never be less than 4 weeks, though. Right? Or is that true?
I think this.
Was there one time?
And I'm sure with the history of the Jenkins project, there probably has been at least one. We're willing to be flexible as needed. For instance, this LTS, we actually intentionally delayed it 2 weeks so that we didn't have to collide with DevOps World, and we didn't have to have some other complications and challenges related to the security fix. So it was an intentional extra 2 weeks that we took, and we take the flexibility, particularly for us around the end of calendar year, December period. Many people take holiday time during that period.
Holiday. What is this that you speak of?
Hard to imagine. How does that happen?
I don't understand. All right. Anyway, thanks for everybody that was hanging out with us live today, all the comments that we had. We love the interaction. So anytime you have questions, in fact, we recently did a webinar. Both Mark and I, complete transparency here, we both work for CloudBees. And we did a webinar, and we had question upon question upon question about all sorts of stuff Jenkins. And I think we're actually going to be doing some more of those. Mm-hmm. I think that's what somebody told me. We'll find out. I'm sure I will get a call after I'm finished here that, yes, you're going to be doing those. But what Mark and I are considering doing is doing 2 live streams over the next couple of weeks. We were just talking about it before we started today, so we don't have any dates. We don't have specifics or anything. But we're going to break out those 2 items that he talked about, which is documentation. What was the correct phrasing for that, Mark?
Migrating plugin documentation to GitHub.
That. So we're going to do that one and plugin modernization.
Exactly. And both those have great potential for a new contributor to make a small but very meaningful contribution without an awful lot of effort, right? It's delightful when we get new contributors who offer a little bit and then decide, hey, was that easy enough? What's the experience like? So we'll do those 2 sessions. Looking forward to them.
Yep. Okay. For everybody that's been here with us live, thank you so much. For everybody else watching the replay, thanks for watching till the end. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click on subscribe. We put out videos about Jenkins usually about twice a week. So if you're wanting to learn just content about Jenkins, sometimes it's simple as what is a Jenkins agent? And recently I did one on, what was the one you, OpenClover.
OpenClover, yeah.
We did OpenClover.
The test optimization feature. You showed how the test optimization feature works in OpenClover, and I've actually referred to that video myself now. Thank you very much for doing that. That was very kind of you, Darren.
You're quite welcome. And I will plug one more video since I'm here. There was a plugin, or excuse me, a video that I did on I'm going to call it an app called Hermit. Just go to inside the CloudBees TV channel and do the little search and look for Hermit. If you're having a problem keeping your tooling versions correct and you're not on containerized yet, whether that's just Docker or full-blown Kubernetes, and you're just trying to manage that, go take a look at Hermit. It's very, very interesting. Open source project from the people at Square, or Cash App. It's actually from Cash App, which Square owns. Super cool project. And it's actually changing how I'm doing some things, because I don't do a lot day-to-day within Kubernetes. Mark, I'm assuming you don't do a lot day-to-day inside Kubernetes. We're the older, grayer people, so we're going to let the containers to the younger people, right? Is that what we're going to say today?
I'm okay with saying that. Actually, I love my containers, but I'm not hosting them in Kubernetes yet. So I've not joined that because a Kubernetes cluster inside my firewall is a bit much.
Yes. So with that, Mark and I are going to say goodbye, and we will see you again probably next week. So again, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe, ring that bell, and once that new session is scheduled, you'll get a notification, and then you can set a reminder for it and show up live. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.